morning. Welcome to the New Thought in World Religion class. Today I am doing a discussion about the 12 keys to loving yourself. It is a topic by Louise Hay. And if you're here and you received a handout, I just want to let you know somebody just informed me that the handout there was a misprint. However, I'm not even sure we're going to get to that topic. So next week I will correct that and we will have a different handout. And to get started today, we are going to have some music. And so this is a talk primarily about Louise Hay, and I want to go through the history of Louise Hay. And part of that history is support groups. She created support groups for people who had HIV and AIDS. And this is a song that has... it's by Jai Josephs, but this has often been associated with Louise because this is a song that she used to start all of her support groups. And Dee is going to play and sing it.
Okay. Could you move over here?
Do we need a microphone, or are you're gonna project?
I will.
Do you need to look at the words, or you're good? All right. No.
I have all the words.
It's good. Oh my God.
I love myself the way I am. There's nothing I need to change. I'll always be the perfect me. There's nothing to rearrange. I'm beautiful, I'm capable of being the best me I can, and I love myself just the way I am. I love you just the way you are. There's nothing you need to do. When I feel the love inside myself, it's easy to love you. Behind your fears, your rage and tears, I see your shining star. And I love you just the way you are. I love the world the way it is, 'cause I can clearly see that all the things I judge are done by people just like me. So till the birth of peace on earth that only love can bring, I'll help him grow by loving everything. I love myself the way I am, and still I want to grow. The change outside can only come from deep inside. I know I'm beautiful and capable of being the best me I can, and I love myself just the way I am. And I love myself just the way I am.
Thank you, Dee. So I asked Dee if he would, or if he could learn this song in 2 days, and he was like, absolutely. And so I thought that would be a nice way to get this started. And I'm going to go through the history of Louise Hay, because I am getting ready to take a history of New Thought class with Unity, and I noticed that not a single mention of Louise Hay is in any of the curriculum, and I was quite disappointed because she really represents modern New Age, and some of the things that we talk about even here in Unity come from that particular movement. And I also wanted to talk about Louise Hay mainly because she's a good representation of somebody demonstrating the principles of New Thought. Well, I'll get into it as I go through her history. So I want to kind of facilitate this part a little differently. Normally we stop and we have discussion, but I want to go through these slides because most of them I'm just going to be reading through, and I want to get to the actual part of teaching where we're talking about the 12 keys to loving yourself. So I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. If you have a comment or question about these, there is on the back of the page that I gave you that is misprinted, that I will fix for next week. But there's a place for notes if you want to write down a note to comment on something from these slides. And then we'll definitely be using the discussion model for the 12 keys to loving yourself, which is a part of Louise Hay's teaching.
Do you have more handouts?
Do we have more handouts? They're misprinted, so, okay.
We got more.
I was going to say, this doesn't look, I think I printed more than one.
There was just one. There's a pile.
One of the keys to loving yourself is not scaring yourself, and it's on there like 3 or 4 times. So maybe somebody just here really needs to let that part sink in. So, but we're going to start with Louise Hay's early years. And she was born October 8th in 1926 in Los Angeles. And she was born to a mother who was very poor, a single mother, who eventually married a very abusive man. And then Louise was also abused by a neighbor very severely at age 5. I'm not going to go into, I don't want to trigger anybody's, issues, so I'm not going to go into that, but she had a very difficult period growing up. I mentioned that there. So, and then she had a pregnancy at the age of 16 and ended up giving the baby up for adoption. Then she moved to Chicago, and that was just after she gave the baby up for adoption, and she needed to get away from the abuse that was taking place in her household. And I'm just going to quote a few things that she said about this. She said, "I ran away from abuse, the abuse I was experiencing at home, but everywhere I went, I ran into more abuse." That was one of the things she experienced. And then she also said, "I wasn't brave enough to kill myself, but I would pray daily that I would die soon. My life was very painful, but I managed to bumble along," is what she said. So. And then as a young adult, she moved to New York City in 1950 and became a fashion model. And she modeled for high fashion. And she also modeled for things like cars as well. So. And then in 1954, she married Andrew Hay, who was an English businessman. And he was very much in both New York high society, as well as while she was married to him, she met with royals. And she had dinner at the White House. So, I mean, this was, he was a very prominent businessman. And she was left for another woman after 14 years of marriage. And then she started going to New Thought. And I thought I had a quote from her about that. Okay, maybe I don't know. Oh. Well, she did. She started to attend Science of Mind Church after the divorce, and a friend had talked to her about, or invited her to a talk for religious science. And when she was listening to the talk, she realized that this, for her, this was really important. She said her inner ding was going off as she was listening to the talk, and she just jumped right into a New Thought. The quote that I don't know. I thought I've put it in here, but into my notes. But this was her, when she experienced the divorce, she referred to it as worse than the rock bottom moments she experienced as a young person, because she lost everything. So she had achieved this with her husband, but really relied on her husband's prominence to give her status, and then she lost it all. And so she jumped into New Thought, and she ended up reading anything she could get her hands on about the New Thought movement. And her favorite authors were Florence Scovel Shinn, Emmett Fox, and Ernest Holmes. However, she was also very influenced by the Fillmores as well. And during that time, she also studied and practiced transcendental meditation and became a leader within that movement as well. She wrote her first book entitled What Hurts in 1977, so she was age 51. And she expanded that. It was often called the Little Blue Book. She printed 5,000 copies, and her friends were like, that's a lot. You're going to waste your money on this. And she ended up selling all 5,000, and then she expanded the book, which is now entitled Heal Your Body, which is affirmations for specific issues that we have in our bodies. And she became a Science of Mind minister in 1980. At age 54. I put the ages in here because Louise talked about how her life didn't even really start until she was in her 40s. And she accomplished a lot. And it's not that we want to be Louise Hay, but she demonstrated effectively how to be yourself. And she just said, I just did whatever was in front of me. Another thing that she had said was, once she got on her spiritual path, it was as though everything was out of her control, but she was okay with that. She just did whatever showed up in front of her. And then in 1984, she was diagnosed with cancer at age 58. And this was another rock bottom moment that she experienced. This was after, she had been in this. But then one of her metaphysical teachers says, you didn't go through this work to die of cancer. It's time for you to put what you know into practice. And that's what she did. She used all of what she had learned over the few years she was in the New Thought movement, and she really practiced it. And she practiced nutrition, and she practiced, alternative modalities of healing, and her body was healed. And that's when she wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life. And that was self-published in 1985 at age 59. In 2012, You Can Heal Your Life had sold 40 million copies. And Louise is the 4th best-selling woman author in the world. The hayride, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but the hayride was something that Louise had facilitated just after her experience with cancer. And it was for people with HIV and AIDS. That was in 1987. And it was a support group that she started to teach people how to heal their bodies through New Thought principles. At the time, very few people were supporting people with HIV and AIDS. There was a strong stigma against people with that disease. Even within spiritual movements, people didn't talk about it. There was a fear that if you touched somebody with HIV and AIDS, you could possibly contract the disease. And so a lot of people that had this disease were, pushed to the edges of society. And it also had an impact on the gay community. And a lot of the people that came to her support groups at the very beginning were part of the gay community. And then it actually started with just 9 people in her living room. She had a friend that was dealing with the disease, and she said, why don't you bring some people over and we'll work through this. And one of the very first things that she said is that we're not going to play Ain't It Awful. And she really taught people how to change their mind and their practices to heal their bodies. And eventually it grew so large that it could not, like her apartment or the living room in her apartment could no longer facilitate it. I think that the largest meeting that she had in her apartment was 90 people. That's a lot. I can't imagine. And then the city of Los Angeles gave her a space that could accommodate 500 people. And the largest meeting that they did have, I believe, was just over 400. And there's a documentary about the hayride. It's called Opening Doors. And I highly recommend it. If you look, and that part's not a misprint, if you look on the sheets that I gave you, there's a QR code and there's also a link to where you can see that documentary on YouTube. And it just goes through the whole experience. And so they wanted to put together a little video, the Hayride did, and the people that were involved. And then she realized that it takes a lot of money to make a movie. And so she said, then I started doing my affirmations. And she did that until she met a director. And that director introduced her to Colin Higgins, who was a big Hollywood screenwriter and director. He directed and wrote Harold and Maude, 9 to 5, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And he wanted to fund the movie. And so he said, well, you know, what is your foundation? And I will deposit money into your foundation. And she said, I don't have a foundation. And so he said, let me get my lawyers together and we'll draw something up. And so that was the creation of the Hay Foundation. And the Hay Foundation it supports a lot of different things. In fact, later on in her life, she took most of her time dedicated to the management of the Hay Foundation and funding projects that she believed could help heal our planet. I think Louise is probably best known for the publishing house Hay House. She opened Hay House in 1987 at age 61 because she couldn't get anyone to publish You Can Heal Your Life. And so she said, well, I'll publish it myself. Louise wanted to help other authors publish transformational books and audio programs. And so she opened the publishing company. Today, Hay House is one of the largest independently owned mind, body, spirit, and transformational enterprises in the world. And I just want to go through some other things from her life. I just have a few more slides about this part. But just some other things related to her accomplishments and age, because we do have a lot of gray-haired people in our congregation, and I think it's important to remember that age is just a number. It doesn't negate our ability to accomplish things in the world, and so that's why I wanted to go through these things. And another thing, you know, I had experienced in my life a period where I was like, I'm too young, I'm too young, I'm too young, I'm too young, and then it immediately switched to I'm too old, I'm too old, I'm too old, and there was really no middle period. And I think that that's one thing that Louise demonstrated very well, because she wasn't even introduced to New Thought until her late 40s. And so most of us in this room are already way ahead of the curve on that. And again, the goal isn't to become Louise Hay. Louise Hay would want you to become yourself, to live authentically and to do what is in front of you to do. So in 2001, she receives an honorary doctorate of divinity from Religious Science International. She was age 75. Oh, you know what? I think there's one other thing I want to admit. At age 70, she started a children's art class as well, and that's important to another slide. But she always really liked art when she was a child, but as the abuse in her life as a child intensified, she stopped doing it. And so she joined a children's art class because she wanted to start doing paintings and such. So, this is between the age of 60 and 75 and 80. She appears at an I Can Do It conference. She published I Can Do It, the book. Hay House opens Hay House Radio. Louise appears on several shows. And when she was 80, she was dubbed the Queen of New Thought by the New York Times. Okay, between the ages of 80 and 90. At this point, she starts stepping away from Hay House and she starts investing a lot of her time and energy into the Hay Foundation. In 2009, she receives the Minerva Award. She released her first mobile app in 2009 as well. And here's the one thing about Louise Hay. She was always ahead of the curve when it came to technology. And she taught very specifically that if you do not stay current with the times, that you will be left behind. That this is a part of the evolution of human consciousness. And so for her, the advent and then evolution of technology corresponds with the evolution of human consciousness. And so to her, it was very important for her to learn and understand new technology. And so she was one of the first authors to release mobile apps, and she did so. She released her book, or Heal Your Body, she released that book as a mobile app. In 2009, she also released the film You Can Heal Your Life. And these are the books that she published between the ages of 80 and 90. Experience Your Good Now, Colors and Numbers, Modern Day Miracles, Love Your Body, You Can Create an Exceptional Life, You Can Trust Your Life, All Is Well, You Can Heal Your Heart, Loving Yourself to Greater Health, Life Loves You, Bone Broth Secret, Mirror Work, Affirmations, an Affirmations coloring book, and Heal Your Mind. So, yeah. I skipped this time. There we go. All right. And then in 2011, at age 85, she completed her signature piece of artwork. And at 87, she had her first New York art exhibition. It was initially supposed to only run for 2 weeks, but they extended it for 6 weeks because of the popularity. And all the revenues from that exhibit went to the Hay Foundation. And then August 30th, 2017, I had a pop-up message come up on my phone, and it was from David Kessler. And that is the person that she co-wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Heart. And it said, in the infinity of life where I dwell, all is perfect, whole, and complete. And just reading that, I immediately knew Louise transitioned. Louise had partnered with David Kessler to help facilitate the grief, because he's a grief counselor, to help facilitate the grief that people would experience in her passing. So she said, let's write a book together, and then I knew that he was the one that was going to announce it when she had transitioned. And so, whoa, emotion. I'm surprised, but okay. Yeah, and this was one of her primary affirmations that she used throughout her life, in the infinity of life, where I dwell, all is perfect, whole, and complete. And one of the things that I was so impressed with was that she prepared. I mean, she knew the impact that she had on so many people, and she prepared for that. And she prepared for it with a professional. I mean, she was a very practical person. You know, she was very practical in the way that she did things, the way that she thought about things. And Robert Holden, who is another person that co-authored books with Louise, asked her one time, how did Louise Hay become Louise Hay? And her answer was just forgiveness. And to me, that is very profound. It's one of the things that she talked about a lot, is how we need to forgive ourselves and forgive others, because if we don't, we're the ones that are in bondage. So that's the last slide that I have about Louise Hay's life. I wanted to kind of just get through all of those so that we can jump into the conversational part. But does anybody have a comment or question about Louise's life?
I got to travel with her, and I loved her. She was a great
I know, you mentioned that last week.
I did?
Is anybody else? Okay. Kat has a question. Or a comment.
I was just going to say, I was in tears at the beginning with the song, because I've had a lot of friends who've had partners that passed away in the 80s. And I know that song is fitting for everyone, but it's very deeply emotional, because I can so see that time period and how powerful those words are that she uses in that song, because there would be very few people that would have been affirming them, loving them the way they are.
Yeah.
So, very good.
Yeah, and then just to start it though, we're not going to play Ain't It Awful. We're not going to, we're going to focus on what is true. And Louise really believed that the number one thing, and that this is what we're going to talk about in the rest of the 2 sessions, but that the main thing that we can do to heal our planet is to love ourselves. That she believed that was the key to healing our own body, is healing everything. And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you consider that the Bible says that God is love. So the activity of love is God. When we're loving ourselves, we're actually in direct contact with a divine force. So, although I don't know that Louise would ever put it like that. She didn't use a lot of traditional religious language. She actually ended up leaving the Church of Religious Science when she started the Hayride, because there were a lot of limitations that she experienced in institutionalized thought. And another thing that she had talked about at one point is that she had to deal with her own homophobia, and that was one of the reasons why, and her own fear of HIV and AIDS, which was one of the reasons why she agreed to do the support groups, which I think is pretty profound, because she recognized there was an area in her life where she was not loving, and so to deal with that, she took action and behaved, even though she didn't have the feelings, she behaved in loving ways. And I think that's really profound, because she recognized that was necessary. And again, not very many people were engaging in that way with people with HIV and AIDS. So, I think another person, Marianne Williamson, did. But I went to the Unity archives to try to find anywhere where Unity had a direct response to the HIV/AIDS crisis, and I couldn't find a single thing other than bringing Louise Hay in as a speaker at certain Unity churches. It was the only thing I could find. And she was also referred to by many people as the only person that could heal HIV and AIDS. So, and she did so by teaching people how to love themselves. Now, she also said she never healed anyone. She believed that, love is the healing force. You love people and they will be healed. She certainly believed that, but she believed that you healed yourself, that she just taught you how to love yourself. And so we're going to get into, the 12 keys to loving yourself. Now, does anybody else have any comment or question about anything else that we've talked about? All right, so we can move on. All right, so we're going to start the 12 keys to loving yourself by just kind of explaining that loving yourself is not vanity. Vanity tends to come from fear. Loving yourself is about accepting yourself as you are. Loving other people is not about what we can get from people. You can't get love from a relationship. Loving people is about accepting them as they are. And one of the things that I think is really important when we talk about love is that love is not passive. It's not, when we love ourselves, we definitely would not allow another person to harm us, because we recognize that is not consistent with love. So love is actually very firm when it comes to certain things. Love doesn't put up with things like abuse. And I think that's why loving ourselves is so important. Even Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And which kind of assumes that you put, that the way that you love yourself is intrinsically connected to the way that you love other people. And another thing is, you can't really love other people more than you love yourself. Because you'll always, even if you found the absolute perfect person, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror and say, I love you exactly as you are, what you're going to do is you're going to question anybody else that truly loves you. You're going to say, do you really love me? Because you don't believe that it's true. Otherwise, you would love yourself unconditionally, For example, if you don't see yourself as beautiful and you have a partner that says, you are so beautiful, you're going to question that they're telling you the truth. It's going to affect your ability to trust that experience. And trust is really the foundation for all relationships. And the more and more we react because of our lack of love for ourselves, the weaker and weaker that's the foundation of a relationship becomes. So loving yourself is not vanity. And Louise believed that that the solution for every so-called problem that we have in the world could be solved by loving ourselves. I remember her saying, you have enough love in your heart to heal the whole planet. but let's start with healing you first. I always really like that. So, does anybody have any comments or questions about that slide? Wendy?
So going back to metaphysical teachings, if as within, so without, that it's not just loving yourself because it brings you close to God, because nothing can bring you closer to God.
Right.
But I can't create a world of love from an inside that's not love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things Louise really talked about is that the world is just always mirroring back to us our own state of consciousness.
I think too that, for me anyway, in my experience, love is such a flow. So I have to learn to be a receiver from Creator so that I can love.
Yeah.
And then as we love, then we can give. If it stops, it becomes a tepid, yucky. So but we have to receive to give and give to receive. So but it's an unending, infinite flow.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that Louise I'll just keep quoting her, said is that the door to the heart opens inward. That we have to receive love. That's what we have to do. Is remove the barriers that block us from that experience. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's doing that, but anyway.
Is that what Jesus did? Is he removed all barriers and was just a pure conduit?
Yeah. All right, we'll get into the first key to loving yourself is stop all criticism. Criticism never changes anything. Refuse to criticize yourself. Accept yourself exactly as you are. Everybody changes. When you criticize yourself, your changes are negative. When you approve of yourself, your changes are positive. Oh. LB has a...
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he said something, and it went, and what came out of my mouth was, it's either blessing or cursing.
Mm-hmm.
You're either blessing or you're cursing, and we don't think of it as a curse, but when we're criticizing, we're actually putting a curse on something, which is, how does Esther say it? You're either adding to the good or the bad, So that was, I just kind of sat there like, what did I say? Because you're either blessing or cursing, and it's that clear when it comes down to it. And it's so hard because our society is always, I found myself this morning, and I'm going, whoa, that's not adding to what I want.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so ingrained in our society to criticize.
Yeah.
But you're either blessing or you're cursing.
Somebody else? Oh, Richard?
Is it good constructive criticism whenever you look at the good and the bad?
Yeah, so I would
Because if
say...
you get too complacent with who you are,
Right.
No,
and I would agree to you. Like if there are areas that I can improve, and we will definitely talk about that, but if there are areas where I can improve, and you see those areas, I mean, I think there's a way to let me know without being hypercritical. And, stopping all criticism doesn't mean that we stop all discernment. I think that those are two different things. Criticism tends to be more, at least in this context, I would say it tends to be more of a negative, rather than, for example, looking in the mirror and saying, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too much of one thing, not enough of another thing.
How much does intention play a role in whether it's criticism or discernment.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, if you talk to yourself, and I didn't have an example prepared, but you could, if your intention was to build someone up by saying, don't be so negative on yourself, or you're always negative on yourself, or something like to that intent, where it could be interpreted as a criticism, but the intention is positive.
I mean, I would say follow spirit. That's how I would do it.
I'll just go back to what Abraham says. Abraham says step one is fine, to look at what you don't want.
Yeah.
Just don't live there. You go there,
Right,
you go,
right.
oh, okay, and then you move on. It's criticism if you don't move on.
Right. Well, I would say, it's not just about outer appearance, but just continually eating away at ourselves. And, babies don't come into this planet gaining their self-worth by measuring their hips, It's that sort of thing that our value and our worth, it doesn't really even come from what we do. One of the affirmations that was one of my first affirmations was that I do not need to earn love. I am lovable because I exist. That I didn't have to earn it. Because I grew up in a religion and in a family where everything was earned, And a lot of times you still weren't good enough. You couldn't, it didn't matter how much you invested in it, you weren't good enough. And so for me, that particular affirmation was extremely powerful in sort of untangling some of the systemic issues that I had. That I was constantly trying to earn a place, earn a voice, earn a position. So, any other comments or questions about this slide? Albie?
Well, this is kind of on the intention thing. My mother was raised a Christian Scientist, so she was pretty positive, but she always, everything I did, she would point out how it could be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never felt that anything I did was good enough. And when I had my own family, at one point I confronted her with this. And her response was, I was just trying to encourage excellence to get you to look at possibilities. But it did not. So her intention was probably very good as far as she could see. But to me, it was, I could never do anything good enough. So even though we may have a good intention, it may not be the way that it's taken by other people. And to me, it was a criticism. It was, I'm not good enough. And it was years before I found that belief. And it was, I can't be me because everybody else can be a better me than I can be. And when I looked at myself, when that came out of my mouth, it was like, nobody else can be me. But I realized that that was the belief that I had incorporated. Mm-hmm. And so we don't realize, when we're criticizing people, if how we're doing it can be devastating.
So I don't know a whole bunch about Christian Science, but do they kind of do what some people in Unity will take Jesus and they'll make that the ideal. They'll take this mythological person and the stories about this mythological person and they make that the ideal. Does that happen in Christian Science?
Christian Science was founded before Unity.
Well, I know, and there was a lot of contention between the two movements.
Yeah, and so it's all, everything is perfect, and anything that's not perfect is error thinking.
Okay.
And when you correct the error thinking, whatever is out of sorts is corrected. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about mindset. It's totally all about mindset.
Greg, could you, maybe it's shining right in my face now, I can't. Thank you. No, and the reason why I ask is because it's possible that your mother was, sort of doing some projection, And you know, I think that sometimes happens in our own movement, where we idealize Jesus as the perfect, you know, image, and then we're striving to be better than what we are, whereas we're already perfect. You know, everything is already perfect. And I mean, we'll talk about this in a later slide. We're perfect, and we can make changes. It was last week. It was the Jesus Christ Superstar syndrome that I talked about, where, you know, you take something that is very mythological, and you're like, that's the ideal, and then if you're trying to strive for that ideal, that can create a lot of challenges.
I know one of the scriptures that I remember as a child hearing all the time is, "Be thou perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Well, that makes you strive to be something that you think you aren't,
Yeah.
and that must have been a pretty strong scripture in that theology.
Right. Yeah.
Don has a
It's a
closer to you now.
closer to my mouth. Okay. I think it's very powerful. The antithesis of this would be to praise where possible. If you see someone doing something, one aspect of which is not the best, it's much better to point to the one that you approve of and praise it to the skies, even accentuate it, because this is what this person is going to feed back to you, and every time you do that, you hear more and more good stuff coming from you, rather than the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't care what religion we get into, we can get into either that sense of I already am whole, and I've seen people in many religions be in that place, or we can take that theology and we can turn it around to say we've got to strive. And you know, even in the unity of the 5 principles, you know, when I see that as God is, we know that. When you know that, and you know who I am, and that I have the power to ask, and that my life is my prayer, I become it, and then the action will come from that. But I also have seen it and used it myself in the beginning with, if I do those things, and then from that I have to take the right action to change the world. And I go, and now I'm going, no. I will act from that in a way that benefits me and everybody.
Yeah.
I hear everyone speaking, and I hear, you know, criticism, something that I feel that we either accept or we reject. And so when someone says something, it's up to us of what we take in from that, or accept into our experience based on what someone says. And it's the same thing when we feel something and we try to communicate it. It sometimes doesn't need to have a result. And when you attach to the result of the criticism, whether it's from you or from someone to you, you can get yourself in trouble, those attaching to the criticism or to the expectation of how that criticism may affect somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, this is ways to love ourselves, so not criticizing ourselves is a major part of this, but kind of going to what you're saying. So we certainly respond differently when we've worked through our own internalized criticisms. For example, when I stopped, you know, one of the ways that I was critical is I felt like I needed to know everything, like I needed to be, so if somebody were to try to educate me on something, either if I got it wrong or if it was something that they just thought I needed to know, a lot of times when I was younger, I would receive that as a negative, like I was doing something wrong. I should have already known this. And then, now I'm taking Unity SCD classes, which has been a great experience. And one of the things I've recognized is that I've healed that issue because I don't feel like I need to know everything anymore. And, now if somebody, helps me out or corrects me, it's really valuable to me. And so I no longer have an emotional reaction to it. And that kind of goes into the whole constructive criticism thing. If I've worked on, I see her. If I've worked on that issue, it just doesn't vibe in a negative way for me. Go ahead.
Sorry, he keeps turning the mic off.
Okay.
I was just going to say that, from a perspective standpoint, I think that there is a difference between recognizing that you are always capable of criticizing yourself, but the mindset shift that we have the opportunity to embrace is actually just, you can look at it as, I am not good enough, versus I have an opportunity to be better. I have an opportunity to learn more. I have an opportunity to embrace this other thing, but just because you're not doing it or feeling it or saying it, it's not a negative.
Right.
It's just an opportunity to grow in a different direction. And so if we can shift that perspective, if somebody can point a finger at us and say, you shoulda, coulda, woulda, cool, maybe next time I will, because that is a great opportunity for me, and it is something that would help me step into a better version of myself. But that is an opportunity more than it is a criticism, and that all comes down to mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there are times when people will approach me, and because I don't feel like I need to know everything, they'll approach me with something, and I'll go, yeah, I don't really see it that way, And I think that's okay too, but I think that, when we are not criticizing ourselves, we're not, really reacting as much, so, yeah. Let's see, I bet we can get through one more slide. All right, forgive yourself. Let go of the past. You did the best you could at the time with the understanding, awareness, and knowledge that you had. Now you are growing and changing, and you will live life differently. And so this was a big one for me, especially since I came out of a very religious system, but I also came out of conversion therapy and I got really, really sick when I got kicked out of the religion that I was a part of. And I really had a hard time with forgiving myself because I recognized that for 5 years in the Bible school and seminary, I was really pushing a narrative that was simply not true. Now I was just pushing somebody else's narrative, but it was, I was told that I could change my sexuality through conversion therapy. And so I went through 3 different programs. Well, people would continually ask me about it. And it's kind of interesting that it's somewhat similar to New Thought, that idea of conversion therapy that, you fake it till you make it. And so you're like, yeah, I'm not gay, but I'm still going through these. And I realized I perpetuated a false narrative that had consequences. And so I needed to really release and forgive myself for that. And, I think that, self-forgiveness is really just recognizing that's just what I knew. That's how I grew up. That's just what I knew. And it made it so much easier for me to forgive the experiences that I had and the backlash that I had when I started speaking up against conversion therapy. There was this huge backlash, and I got kicked out of the home that I was living in because I lived on campus. I got kicked out of seminary. I didn't have a family anymore. I got kicked out of the only community that I really ever knew, and so there was a huge backlash. And that meant that I needed to forgive a lot as well, because I was very, and rightfully so, very angry with what had taken place. So, but the key to that was not just forgiving them; it was forgiving myself and letting go. And then I recognized, what? This is just what's going on in their head. They're just behaving in a way, in the same way that I did, because that is what they were trained to do. And so I think that, forgiving ourselves is imperative to our ability to forgive others, because when we recognize that, it's kind of like what the song says, that we're all the same, Does anybody have a comment to self-forgiveness?
It's a lifelong process.
It is a lifelong process. Yeah. It's almost sometimes daily, if not, or weekly, if not a daily process for me. Because we're all still learning, we're all still evolving, and we're all still growing. And a lot of times I'll have a conversation and then have to run to the mirror and say, I forgive you and I love you anyway. Because I'm still figuring it all out, and I still don't, so go ahead.
I do believe it's a lifelong process.
Yes.
But it was also a major block for me. If I couldn't have some self-forgiveness, I really couldn't receive the love I needed from God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting, because forgiving ourselves unclogs the system. It unblocks us. It's, it opens that door to the heart and helps love to come in. Or allows the love to come in.
Different perspective. So forgiving yourself is kind of just along the lines of the criticism. Like it's, criticisms of yourself and letting that go. Forgiving yourself is accepting yourself. And even in a moment, like me and my partner, if I have a moment of stress and I treat him in a way that I'm not happy with, even in the moment, I feel that and it rises up in me. But if I hold on to that and I say, oh man, I can't believe I did that, and keep holding on to that, and then that resistance only causes our situation to not grow, but to, it can cause even more separation. So accepting that, here's how I acted in a moment, and recognizing where that came from. Like, something in my heart caused me to react in a certain way, and it's happened, and it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can address it from here and say, you know what? I had an emotion, and that emotion is okay.
Yeah.
And if you live from the place you're at right now, and but the past can come up and it can arise, but let it fall down and realize you're here right now. You had emotion, you had experiences in life, things rose up for a reason, everything played out, and you are where you are today. And today, you're living, you're breathing, you're able to look at the beautiful sun and the trees and the flowers and all the people around you and recognize that we're all in this together doing the same thing. So don't hold it against yourself.
Right. Go ahead.
I was gonna, forgiveness is literally severing the energetic bonds, like the ball and chain, the weight that you carry along with you. When you forgive yourself, you break those chains, and it allows you to rise higher vibrationally. Mm-hmm. And so, like, all the stuff that you're carrying is weighing you down, and your thoughts are what are weighing you down as well. And so, by forgiving and releasing and truly forgiving yourself, not the affirmation, but like truly love thyself and forgive thyself, and you will get to rise to a higher frequency, a higher plane of existence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Louise was influenced by A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles talks about a lot. I mean, the whole Course in Miracles is all about forgiveness, but it talks about how you forgive because you've done nothing wrong. And that's what I really like about this particular statement is that you did the best you could at the time with the understanding and awareness and knowledge that you had. That's forgiveness. When you begin to recognize that the way people, the way people are behaving or the way I've behaved is because that is the pattern of consciousness that I had at the time, and that consciousness is evolving. My consciousness is evolving, but the consciousness of the planet is evolving as well. And one of the things I really like about Unity is that they have the concept of chemicalization, which is when a new pattern of thought and an old pattern, as you're introducing a new pattern, there's this like chemicalization that can happen. And I think we're observing this in the world today. You know, there's a lot of this chaotic stuff, but part of the reason why is because a new pattern of consciousness, a higher consciousness, is beginning to affect a larger group of people, and we're seeing this chemicalization take place, this reaction between an old pattern of thinking that is going away and a new pattern of thinking that is kind of beginning to overshadow it. And so, and that goes, I mean, that goes with forgiveness as well, because forgiveness is the release of the old.
I think an understanding of what sin is.
Yeah.
Because we have such an idea from the propagation of you're a sinner.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that it's like shooting at a target and missing the bullseye because it's the first time you've ever held a bow and arrow in your hand, and you don't know how to aim, and you don't know how to pull, and we don't criticize a child when they're take their first step. But we criticize ourselves and those around us when we don't know how to walk properly.
Yeah.
And when we realize that, I think that leads to a deeper level of forgiveness in not just ourselves, but everyone, because everybody is on a learning.
Right.
And when we allow people to learn, that's when we can let go and forgive.
Brenda, and then I just saw the time. We're going to have to do announcements. Do you have the announcements? Okay, good.
Whenever I first come out as a transgender person, and I was chosen for a church, and I found Unity, and then I found out that they was doing the Course of Miracles here. That was the biggest improvement in my life that I come across in several years. And at that time, whenever I first come to Unity, I was taking 5 different kinds of psychiatric medications. And after I was at Unity for maybe 6 months or so, I no longer needed the psychiatric medications. So I contribute that to Unity and the Course of Miracles, and also the book, the New Testament that Regina Dawn Akers has got out. I've used the Course of Miracles and the New Testament book that Regina's got out, and it has helped me not to have psychiatric medication.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yeah, and there's a lot of parallels between Course in Miracles and Unity. Before I started attending Unity here, I went through, I was in a Course in Miracles group for a year, and there's a lot of parallels between Louise's work and A Course in Miracles, but then a lot between Unity and A Course in Miracles as well. So we need to do the announcements. You got it covered? Appreciate it.
We need Course in Miracles.
Yeah. I think we have a Course in Miracles group here.
Yeah,
they meet on Tuesday.
It meets on Monday night.
On Monday night.
It's
online.
It's a Zoom meeting.
Zoom.
Okay. Go ahead.
Beginning May 1st, join us Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., excluding holidays, for Silent Sunrise, and feel the power of collective prayer. Stay a few minutes or 2 hours if you wish. Submit your prayer requests online to be included in our daily intentions. Beginners and Intermediate West African Drum class is Monday at 7 p.m., open to everyone. The first month of lessons is free. Both Drum Circle and Carrie Kugler's Exploring Spiritual Practices meets Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. The Spring Fashion Boutique is Friday, May 5th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. and Saturday, May 6th, 8:30 to 11 a.m. Ladies, please sort your gently used spring summer clothing and donate what you are willing to part with for this event. The items must be clean, no stains, no tears, no missing buttons. Purchases are on a love offering basis. The 9:15 a.m. New Thought World Religion class on May 7th will be 12 Keys to Loving Yourself, based upon the writings of Louise Hay, taught by James Masters. Open to all adults, and you can attend on any Sunday. Sunday, May 7th is our monthly potluck and our quarterly town hall meeting. Sign up in the hallway telling us what you might be bringing. That's next week, yeah? Yeah. Save the date. Sue will be teaching The Christ starting May 24th. The class will meet for 5 weeks. This is on the licensed Unity teacher track. Cost is $10 for credit and also cost is $10 for credit and also suggested as a love offering for non-credit participants. After today's service, there will be team captains in the hallway recruiting volunteers for all teams. Where are you called to serve? Great opportunity to connect with others. Mary Lou's family invites everyone to share in the celebration with cake in the fellowship hall immediately following the service today.
All right, thank you. Somebody, can you turn that off?
Yeah.
For the streaming, and then we'll circle up in the back and